And welcome into another episode of Tiger Territory, a Detroit Tigers podcast, part of the Foul Territory Network. I am Kieran Steckley. With me, as always, is a man who would never saw varsity's horns off because that'd be cruel. He is Cody Stavenhagen. How you doing?
Doing good, Kieran. It's December, man. Where did the time go? We're going to be in Lakeland like before you know it. The offseason is flying, even though nothing has really happened.
Yeah, well, because you're going to be here in my neck of the woods, as all the powers that be will be in my neck of the woods here pretty soon for winter meetings. Maybe some things will happen by then, but as of now, I was kind of looking at it. It's been a pretty quiet offseason, but also noisy offseason for the Tigers because, AJ Hinch did a little bit of a media tour. He was Manager of the Year finalist, which included this podcast. So you can go back and listen to it, or you can go back and watch it on YouTube. Very entertaining if my biased opinion is valid there. So he did a media tour, and then obviously there was the Scooble element with everything, So they're in the news. The Tigers have been in the news, but not really a lot has happened. So much so that we start talking big picture stuff. A couple things slipped through the cracks. So I guess we should talk about them here for a second. But overall, when you look back, you just started this like, oh my God, it's December. And you start thinking like, we don't really have much tangible to look at. And I actually had this thought too. I went back and looked at it. So just some random moves that Scott Harris had made, the past two off seasons. He signed Jack Flaherty on December 20th. So obviously we're not quite there yet, but we would be in the realm. Maeda was signed on November 28th. So now we're past that as we record this on December 1st. The Canna trade. You remember how early the Canna trade was last year?
It was right away. It was a couple of days after the World Series. Yeah.
November 4th. And Jahen, the Jimenez trade a couple years ago, that was on December 7th. So we're, in theory, kind of getting close to some of these moves happening. But as of now, just not a whole lot, which is funny because interest in the team is higher than it's been in a while.
Yeah, I would expect that to change relatively soon. Now, this is also the case for a lot of teams across the league. The entire market is, of course, being held up by Juan Soto, especially for hitters. Until Soto signs, I don't think P. Alonso is going to sign. I don't think Christian Walker is going to sign. I don't think Bregman's going to sign. There's going to be a massive trickle-down effect after Soto signs, which we might be getting pretty close to happening. Now, I am a little surprised there hasn't been more movement on the pitching market, especially the low-end pitching market, the one-year deals that the Tigers, in theory, are seeking. So I wonder, will that change in the next week or two? Could we see a Walker Buehler type guy sign, whether it's with the Tigers or someone else? I think that the wheels on that are about to get moving. I mean, Blake Snell just signed, so maybe some teams that were in after him now begin their pivot. The market is set a little bit contract-wise. I think some things are gonna start going. I wouldn't be shocked if the Tigers make a pitching acquisition here in the near future. And the quiet nature also might hint toward the Tigers being interested in the trade market. I don't think that doesn't mean they're interested in free agency. We can talk about that a little bit more as this episode goes on. But clearly they're interested in the trade market, and those things by the very nature, I think, tend to take longer to play out. Also, the Soto thing can be involved in those factors, but winter meetings, could the Tigers make a deal at winter meetings? Wouldn't that be fun? Be kind of the talk of the league. That, I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm just saying that could be cool. And I think I think the noise league wide is about to really pick up.
So speaking of Soto, we can officially close that chapter, the Tigers and the Soto fantasy world, right? Because there wasn't even a hint of a meeting. So Scott Harris is not going to get a pizza from your boy because there was no leaked sources say that they offered him a contract. So we're officially closing the door.
Not yet. Ooh. You never know. What if Scott Boras wants to pit the two highest bidders against each other one last time? He could always leak. There's a mystery team that plays near Canada that is in on the mix. Like the Tigers were never in on Juan Soto. That chapter was never started to begin with. But for the betting odds when there being a tweet by like a certain league-wide reporter, that's ridiculous. That chapter might not be entirely over just yet. It's probably everyone knows the Tigers are.
We shall see. And I do want to come back to the Soto trickle down effect here later, because I think that's something that, I mean, it literally affects everything. And we know baseball has a problem with stars signing in we'll call it a timely manner. So, all right. So the cleaning up a little bit, some Tigers news. They agreed to a contract with Ricky Vanasco, who you might remember. Was he the first trade deadline deal I believe the Tigers made this past year? I think it was before everybody else for cash considerations. And he will make $925K should he make the major league or be in the major leagues. He's got a spring training invitation. Only pitched, I don't have that in front of me, but only pitched, I believe, twice, 2 outings. And really more so if you read about it and you kind of look at it, they were tinkering with him from the get-go. I would be interested to see kind of what they have him working on in spring training, and whether it nets any results. He seems pretty enthused if you look at the couple interviews that he did about some of the stuff that they were having him do. So he's deep in the lab right now. Makes sense to bring him along and see what that looks like in the next calendar year. And we have a Bailey Horn waiver claim. He was most recently with he's actually only played for Chicago or Sox teams, I believe, in their organizations, like Chicago, Cubs, and White Sox, and Boston Red Sox. So now he breaks that trend, and he will be at least a part of the Detroit organization. Not great numbers, left-handed pitcher, reliever, 13 earned runs in 18 innings, gave up 5 home runs. But he's a lefty. He can throw 95 on the fastball, and he's got a sweeper that goes into low to mid-80s. So you can imagine why the Tigers were interested in that. So those are your cleanup moves, Cody. Where do you want to start on that?
Yeah, I don't. This is why we need some real moves, because I don't know that this is the most scintillating conversation ever. But Vanasco, interesting that the Tigers get to kind of continue their work with him. Probably a sign that, as you said, he's enjoyed that. He feels good about being in this organization. And for a reminder of just like how much the Tigers tinker with pitchers these days, I had to go back and look this up. I remember standing in the clubhouse talking to Ricky, and I was like, wait, is he the guy they're teaching a cutter? Or is he the guy they're teaching Scooble's changeup? Or is he like which like pitching wizardry instance was this guy? And he's tweaked some grips, kind of scrapping the curveball. And really trying to hone in on a cutter to play off what's a pretty good 4-seam. Like you said, Vanasco, only 2 appearances with the Tigers, didn't allow any runs, and was quite good in Toledo, a 1.06 ERA in 17 innings after joining Detroit there. So to be able to get him off the 40-man and keep him in the organization sounds like a nice move. Bailey Horn, yeah, again, guy you're not throwing a party for right now, but were you throwing a party for Brennan Hanafy, this time last year, who ends up getting a crucial double play to beat the Houston Astros in the playoffs? So, let's pay attention to all these guys, because especially under the current order of the Tigers, they all do kind of matter. Horn threw a sweeper 60% of the time last year, very sweeper heavy. Also has some really good fastball stuff, but has struggled throwing strikes. So I'll be curious, to learn more what kind of mechanical adjustments the Tigers might be making to get him in the strike zone, because just with that sweeper profile, if he can get ahead in the count, he actually hasn't missed a ton of bats, at least at the major league level with the sweeper, but you could see a world in which that could be just a kind of a dangerous concoction of stuff. So there's the quick wrap on Bailey Horn.
It all makes sense. And to be honest, you just kind of trust the Tigers' judgment when it comes to pitching attributes that they want in their system. Speaking of somebody who has quite a bit of pitching attributes and has been in the system for a couple of years now, that'd be one Jackson Jobe. So I'm not looking for a deep analysis on Jackson Jobe here, but I'm kind of curious where I just wanted to get on record for the first time it's not the new year yet, but you understand what I'm saying. Like going into the new year, on kind of where you stand on Joe expectations, because we obviously got a taste of him last year. It was a nice feel good story that he was added to the roster. He had a moment in the playoffs that didn't necessarily go his way, but it still was kind of cool to see him, like your first round pick, your much maligned first round pick there for a while, come into a big spot, and you obviously still believe in the stuff. He's a guy that there's going to be, like, once people start doing like future bets and looking at, like, he might not have a lot of value initially because he's going to be one of those early candidates. People are going to be looking at him for like a Paul Skeens type season because they were the top right-handed starters in the minors, right? So let's just go on record here, Cody. Where do you kind of stand on Joe? Because I kind of think we're gonna know a little bit based on where they put him in the pecking order of the rotation, what they kind of expect out of him. And also keep in mind 77, 64, 91, 3 seasons, that's innings per year. Not a lot of miles on that arm. It's a good thing in one way, something to consider in another.
Yeah, the innings thing is actually interesting because you would expect, based on that there's no way Jobe surpasses 120, 130 innings next year, which means if he were to be in the big leagues the bulk of the year and healthy, you're going to have to really like limit his starts, or you're going to have to, I'm sure the Tigers would build in extra rest days, but you would have to like consider shutting him down. That's such a low innings threshold. So something to consider, but before we even start worrying about the innings, I think it just is like, is Jackson Jobe going to begin the year in Detroit or not? And I think there's a lot of hype around Jobe. There's also already been like a tendency to be like, all right, relax. Like he's probably going to start the year in AAA, whatever. I'm going to go the opposite route. I've thought about this because I've talked about it, in a couple recent things I've done. Like, I think Jackson Jobe should be in the opening day rotation. I just will not be convinced that anyone other than Tarek Skubal has better stuff than Jackson Jobe. And maybe he's not completely finished yet, but he's pretty close. The Tigers already put him in the big leagues, even though I know it was in a different role. But that tells you they think he can do this. You can just watch him and be like, no, he can get major league hitters out. And I have a tough time believing he's really going to be challenged appropriately in AAA. Yeah, it'd be a quieter setting for him to work on sequencing or, whatever it is they want him to work on. I think have him learn it in the big leagues because Jackson Jobe can be really, really good. He could be an American League Rookie of the Year, top 3 type guy. He could be your second or third best starter in your rotation next season. I don't think the expectation should be limited for Jackson Jobe. I think the Tigers should hold him to a high standard. I think he's at an advanced enough level now where they should push him to do this in the big leagues. I don't know if that's going to happen based on their history, the way they like to handle pitchers. I could see them slow playing him a little bit. But if he comes out and he's at all effective in spring training, I just don't want to hear that, yeah, we're going to send him to AAA because we want him to refine the curveball a little bit. Like, come on, let's be past that. The Tigers should be trying to make a push to the playoffs, and I think Jackson Jobe should be a part of that as much as possible.
Push to the playoffs, push for a division championship, I think is the next step. But I'll say this about Jobe. He has a level of experience that you are comfortable with bringing him on and putting him on the postseason roster, right? So that was last year. And he has obviously the attributes of an elite pitcher. No one's disputing that. So how about we get him with Jake Rogers catching him and Chris Fetter in his
every day
in his ear every day, and AJ Hinch imparting his wisdom every day. And that's nothing to say about the operation in Toledo. I know they pay attention to all these things. I understand that. But you thought he was good enough to do it then. It's going to be hard to convince me that you don't think he's good enough to do it come late March, early April. And even if you do somewhat like handicap him a little bit where it's like, we're going to max you out about probably 4 here. Like you can manage that. But the talent is the talent. And I think for the Rookie of the Year stuff, he's gonna be a guy that, and with this operation and the way the game is played today, it's gonna be hard to quell some of that Rookie of the Year buzz if he has any measure of success early on. So, looking forward to see how that goes. All right. Let's go into some more hypotheticals, Cody. We've got a couple names here that we'll spend some time on that are in. Oh, they're both NL Central players actually, and not so secretly teams are trying to trade them. So Nolan Arenado, that's the name that's kind of come up a lot recently, and he plays third base. Tigers have a desire to upgrade the corners. He's a name. There's a lot that kind of makes a lot of sense, but there's contracts, there's age, there's performance, and we're going to try to hash some of that stuff out a little bit. So the basics for everybody. He is going into his age 34 season. He will make $21 million. Age 35 season, that's 2026. He'll make $16 million. His age 36 season, he will make $15 million. That's 2027. So it's 3 years.
Interesting contract structure. You don't really see that very often.
3 years, $52 million in total. All right. So last year he was a 2.5 WAR player. He had 272. He had 16 home runs and 71 RBI. It should be noted that those were his lowest totals since 2019, if you take out the 2020 season. So as Dan Dickerson would say, we throw that out every time. So like basically lowest in a half decade, we'll call it, for Nolan there. And 394 slugging. He had an OPS plus of 101. So those are some basic numbers there. And he still can play defense. Among third basemen, he led in fielding runs above average, which 13. So he still has the glove there. There's some stuff out there about how he could play some first base too. Okay, take that for whatever amount of value you want to take it. But he was below league average in hard hit rate. He was slightly below league average in walk percentage. He was quite a bit below average in strikeout percentage. And his win probability added at the plate, offense only, was only 0.2. All right, so 0.2. And he pulls the ball. Because I'm like, all right, right-handed bat, you got that porch over there on left at Comerica. He pulls the ball 34.5% of the time, league average 30.3. It should be noted. I know I'm throwing a lot of numbers out here. It should be noted he has the same walk percentage. This is just last season. He has the same walk percentage as Bregman and a little bit higher than Keith, if you want to know. Bregman's batting average on balls in play last year, 264. Nolan's 296. All right, so like there's some similarities and then there's some gaps. And Bregman graded out a little bit better in some defensive metrics, not so much in others. Just like any other stat, you can pull up a million of them. One guy's better here, there, blah, blah, blah. So what you have here is a declining player. Obviously, he's getting older. But is it salvageable for what the Tigers need? In my opinion, is kind of what this comes down to at a cost point, because, again, we're talking about how the Tigers are trying to run their organization. So, a lot of numbers I put out there, Cody. When you see this on your X feed, when you are seeing the scuttlebutt elsewhere about Nolan want to be traded, how it could potentially fit for the Tigers, like what do you make of that? What do you make of all that?
Yeah, this is a little bit more than a hypothetical. All right. So, like, this is real. The Tigers have crunched the numbers, I assure you, and they are thinking about this and they're asking themselves the same question. It seems like, based on what I've heard, based on what some other reports that have trickled out, they have convinced themselves there's something to like in Nolan Arenado. So they're going to be at least interested in this being a real trade conversation. I believe that. You threw out a lot of numbers. I think the only one that matters is the bat speed metrics. He ranked in the bottom 28th percentile in bat speed last year. His swing length was in the bottom 1%. Now, that's a lot of longer limb power hitters, like Aaron Judge is also in the bottom 1%, but that just tells you, like, there is some concern. His bat speed is declining. He's also dealt with some minor injuries, including some back issues that have built up, especially last year. So the question, how much of that is salvageable? A good word you used. The Tigers seem to view him as salvageable, which to me is interesting because I see these metrics and I get a little concerned. Like, the contract structure helps. You're paying him less, the next 2 years. It's only 3 years versus you might, if you were going to make a real run at Bregman, which, again, I think the Tigers are looking long and hard at their third base options. And as much as it's been reported that that's not a priority or whatever, I wouldn't rule that out yet. I think they're going to do something. But Arenado does seem to make a little more sense in Tigers land, a kind of depreciating asset that maybe they think they can get something more out of if they can get him back to full health, maybe have some adjustment in mind, becomes really interesting. But another flaw, like, he's a right-handed bat. He didn't hit lefties last year at all. 646 OPS. 2 years ago, he didn't really hit lefties well. Now, for his career, he hits lefties extremely well. The defense, it's still plus, but it's not the all-time great defense it was there for a run of years. The first base thing, supposedly, according to the Athletics' Katie Wu, Arenado is going to be open to playing some first base. Does that matter? I see why that would matter in the Tigers' world of wanting to move and manipulate their parts, but, like, how often, or if you have Nolan Arenado, how much are you going to really want him to play first base? Like, I struggle with that question. Yeah, you may have seen the comparisons on social media of just his numbers versus Matt Vierling's numbers. It doesn't really leave you itching for Nolan Arenado. At the same time, Arenado had, like, what's considered a down year for him last season, and Fangraphs had him as a 3-win player. Can you get him back to being a 4 or 5-win player? Can you get him for 80 cents on the dollar? Can you get the Cardinals to throw in some cash? The Rockies are already paying, I believe, a small portion of that salary, $5 million next year and $5 million in 2026. So, for as much as there are some glaring cons for Nolan Arenado, there are also some reasons why I see why the Tigers would be interested. I don't think it's my favorite option personally, but if they were to pull off this deal, like, you can't say it wouldn't be highly intriguing.
Yeah, so when it comes to a trade, I'm kind of looking at cash. I think has to be like the 2A part of the equation. Prospects going back and then cash coming with Nolan. I think that's that.
I don't think cash should matter because the Tigers have a low payroll. Why can't you pay Arenado a high AAV for 1 year?
Well, because you're trying to see if they're desperate enough to do it, which the Cardinals seem desperate to like really move on, really lower payroll. Yeah. Why not? Like that's part of the value. Now, sure. Now cash and prospects, no cash, less like that can be negotiated, but I feel like that's going to be part of it. It is worth noting Nolan has a no trade clause. So, like, any deal, he's also a Boris client. So there's going to be an up and up on any deal that potentially would happen. Like, he would have an idea of his role, and the Tigers would have a clear understanding of what he wants. Another note, he was hitting, 3-4, him and Goldschmidt. Like, that experiment ended up, not going that hot for the Cardinals. He only batted 51 games last year, 5th or 6th in the lineup. That's it. So, like, if he comes to the Tigers, he's probably batting 5th or 6th, right? Depending on some matchups. I don't. Yeah,
he's probably batting higher than that.
Well, like, in theory, he would come to a team that, if you believe in some development, that he is not expected to carry the load. Even if he is, quote, batting higher than that in the lineup. He would not.
Matt Vierling's hitting third. I think Nolan Arenado is also hitting third.
That's a good point. So, anyway, like, there's all these factors here. And again, would you rather have Nolan for the next 3 years at $52 million, or Spot Track, who has Bregman for a 6 for $165? Some people go 7, a little bit more money, whatever. we're looking in that range. Or Bregman
Supposedly
for
he wants more. Supposedly he's trying to get like 8-230 or something crazy. I don't think he's going to get that, but
so and also the waiting game. So like if you just need to upgrade, you don't necessarily want to play ball with Bregman and how he wants to go about his free agency, which is of course his right. Like this is another option there that has some potential savings. And again, there's an argument to be made that you're going to have a lot more value from Nolan, even as he, with age declines a little bit, just based on what you're paying him. And again, if the cash kick in comes in, that's a factor. So it feels like a more savvy move than signing Bregman in February. You see what I'm saying? Like there's you have some numbers.
It seems
here.
like the definition of the calculated risk term that Scott Harris is so fond of. Now, for it to make sense, the Tigers are going to have to know something that we don't, that you can't go find on Baseball Savant, that would indicate you can still get more out of him at age 33, because there's a lot of publicly available data that suggests he's a declining player. So do they have something else where they think, well, we can still get 2 pretty dang good years out of this guy? It's also right. They don't need him necessarily to be the 6-7 win player he was a few years ago. No, they need him to be a really good 3-4, maybe even 5 win veteran presence. And you could talk yourself into that being possible.
The Tigers last year batted .288 on balls in play. All right. The league average is .291. They wins probability added at the plate was 4.4. League average, or minus 4.4. The league average is -3. They have to upgrade the lineup, obviously. And there's
all right. You're getting me right. You got to stop using batting average and balls in play, because it's always going to hover around like 290 to a little bit more, like any sample, any team, like ever. Wow. And it's a very volatile. It's not really like that much of a skill unless you're just a pure line drive hitter. So like if the Tigers can't upgrade their batting average and balls in play, like that's not something that's just.
Well, would you like them to be an above average hitting team in that metric? Like.
Well, it's just luck though. Like it's just luck.
Okay, well, you can make that argument for almost all of these stats.
I mean, you get some dudes who hit the ball hard, then that helps you. Nolan Arenado does not hit the ball hard, unfortunately. Even, you can go back a few years. His average exit velocity throughout his career has been under 90 miles an hour.
What about win probability added -4?
I like that stat. That's a stat we should be using more. It's a great stat.
So, but again, Nolan was, when I look at my notes, he was barely above 0, but he was technically above 0. And so like there are upgrades that Nolan brings, but I do agree with you in the sense that like they better have some measurement that we don't have. And also I was going to say this would be a kind of a nice litmus test of this administration, this coaching staff, that like obviously they brought on veterans, but they haven't brought on like a former superstar who like is declining but still has like real recognition as we know the decline is happening. You see what I'm saying? Like, so how they go about doing that, I'm having like Moneyball, David Justice, Billy Beane in the batting cage, like visions in my head. Whether that's fair or not, it just kind of came up, you know what I mean? So like I would love to see, or love to know, even if it never became public, how deep into this they got if they don't do it, or if they do it, like what kind, because also the value that they send over there is going to be telling about the league's opinion of Nolan as well.
So let's plug that right now. For our next episode, we are going to talk about, solicit trade proposals from you, the loyal viewers / listeners. So I think a big question in all this, what would it take to get Arenado? Even though the Cardinals don't love him, like what are you comfortable sending back? Send us a couple ideas. Maybe we'll talk about them on the pod, and send us ideas for other trades across the league. We are going to talk Tigers trade proposals next episode.
Yeah, so you can do so via X if you want. Cody is at Cody Stavenhagen. I am at Kieran _Steckley. Our pod page is at Tiger Territory _. If you want to comment on our YouTube channel down below, if you're watching, that would also be an easy way to for us to see it. But we're everywhere, so we would like to hear it from everywhere in terms of any ideas, even any loosely constructed ones. We can take them and run if you want, and then also like returns, because the returns is the trickiest part. And I also would be very curious to gauge the fan base, because I think the return for these trades will also give us like an indication of kind of how they're feeling about certain guys, right? Mm-hmm. So I'll be very curious about that, because as we said at the beginning, it's been relatively quiet, but it's now December, and the stove will start to heat up. And if someone jumps the gun on any free agent or trade move before like the Juan Soto trickle happens, like that's also a very interesting part of this offseason. All right, Cody, nice, solid podcast. Don't feel hungover from turkey at all from Thanksgiving. Nice, good discussions there. Can't believe we're already to December. Anything else before we jet out of here?
No, turkey was really good at Thanksgiving this year. I guess I gotta stop complaining about turkey. 2 years in a row, we've had really good turkey here.
Yep, I was happy with mine as well. Had a drama-free Thanksgiving, if you don't count the second half of the Lions game. But a drama-free Thanksgiving, that will probably change moving forward, but we'll enjoy the times when they occur. All right. I want to thank everybody for listening, following, subscribing, wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, all the rest, subscribing, watching on YouTube. Hit that notification bell too. Helps us out as we grow the show, moving into the more crucial part of the off season. We want to be getting you all the best opinions and insights that we can. And so we really appreciate everybody's another past Thanksgiving, another thankful statement from me. Thankful for all you guys for listening, sticking through us through a change. I know it's changing the habit can be hard sometimes, but Cody and I appreciate it. So hope everybody had a happy and safe Thanksgiving. Welcome to December. It's good to be here. It's good to be talking about the Detroit Tigers with you all. So for Cody Stavenhagen, I am Kieran Steckley. Everybody have a great day.